Okay, wonderful. Hello, everybody. For those that don't know, hi, my name's Elliot Zisman. I'm the founder of Phase 2. I thought for this lunch and learn session, we'll go through some slides, open up to Q&A and discussion. There's 7 of us on the call, so if you would like to ask questions, either use the chat box, unmute yourself, or just put your hand up and say hello. It's being recorded, as you can see, and it'll be shared with you afterwards. So, right, before we launch in, for those that don't know, Phase 2 has been going for almost 5 years now, which feels like a long time, and specialised in setting up meetings for clients with people they need to speak to. So, that's your ideal customers. We're an outbound marketing agency. We specialise in LinkedIn and email, and I think really differentiate ourselves by writing messages that start up conversation, spacing those messages out so that you're not coming across as some annoying git, and then responding as appropriate to book the meetings in your diary. But today is not what that's about. It's about marketing budgets and helping you understand how much you need to be spending or should be spending. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is I think really sort of trying to define what marketing should include. Yeah, I mean, the marketing budget simply sets out all the money you plan to spend on marketing activity, whether you budget year at a time, quarterly, monthly, that's up to you. Choice is yours. And the budget needs to show, really clearly what your marketing goals are, yeah, and how you intend to achieve them as part of the plan, and then break it down into different activities you plan on using, such as paid advertising, marketing staff, consultants, social media, websites, leaflets and flyers, if we all remember those kinds of things. And then talk about sort of how often and how many times you expect to carry out each activity, and then how much each is supposed to cost. Basically, any work you need to do that is sort of up to the opportunity being generated by the sales team is what I call part of marketing. And I tend to split it into these sort of 2 elements, 2 sides that you see on the screen here. The fit stuff, which is often, once spent, it's spent. That's sort of building your brand, putting together the collateral, the design, all these kinds of things, and any technology you need. And then the bits that's directly spent on generating opportunities for your sales team. So that could be digital or advertising or social media work, that kind of thing, as well, of course, as outbound marketing. I mean, before I sort of launch into sort of what people are spending and things like that, is there anything people sort of think I've missed off that list in a sort of big way? No? Good. Wonderful. Paul, you're muted if you were talking.
Sorry. Yes, I was just considering the sort of the building your brand piece, really, and yeah, there's obviously, it could sort of fall on both sides, I guess. You've got initial costs around that, but of course, building the brand is an ongoing process, which involves the more variable stuff that you're going to be choosing how to spend your money with and on what. Just thought,
yeah. I mean, building a brand in itself is difficult to measure. I think if you could also look at this thing on sort of the left-hand side is quite difficult to measure, and the right-hand side should be easier to measure.
Sure.
Of course, building a strong brand will directly lead to more opportunities, as will a great website, as will a good design and all the sort of collateral. But I think it's difficult to then allocate, and I think maybe that will come clear in the next slide when I talk about how to set the budget. Some bit of it is you can really say, this is I've got this spend has given me 10 opportunities, so I can work it out. Whereas spending money on branding,
sure, yeah,
will lead to just a bunch of stuff, and it's kind of difficult to really really measure it in the same way.
Mhm.
But I think what's important is this sort of this next bit, and the way that I always encourage people to measure how much you should spend is as a percentage of the money you want to make, as percentage of your turnover. Because it's obvious that a bigger company will spend more money on marketing, yeah, than a smaller company. Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola spend millions and billions on this kind of stuff. But I think the way to measure things is really as a percentage of what your say, revenue, as a percentage of revenue. And I think that should be done across the year. So I think, you would say that I want to make whatever, £1 million this year. I'm going to, what percentage of that do I need to spend to generate that £1 million? Now, there's a lot of surveys out there. This one's from Deloitte, and it surveys chief marketing officers. So there's a variety of different sizes of companies, heads of marketing. And the real magic number, they say, is 9%. Now, you can see from the slide, that's gone up and down quite a lot over the last few years. It is returning to pre-pandemic levels. And although it's shown that, dip recently, I don't think that's because marketing spend has come down. I think it's because revenues have come up. So I think that 9% is what you might say is a more realistic, consistent level, both before and after the pandemic. But of course, behind those numbers, it's not just I'm not sitting here saying everyone should spend 9% of what they want, their budget. Their budget should not always be 9%. It varies depending on the type of company you are. So if you drill into the Deloitte numbers, if you are a B2B company that has a product rather than a service, on average, it's 7.8%, of revenue spent on marketing. If you're a B2C services company, if you're a B2B services company rather than product company, it's 5.9%. On the B2C side, it varies wildly. Yeah, you've got services companies are typically spending 6-7%, product companies at 15%. And I think, that's where you look at things like if you are a B2B services company, what are we talking about here? Restaurants, hairdressers, local things. I would suggest that a lot of their marketing budget is going to be on things like, shop fronts, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And would that come into it? If you've got a shop and a shop window, does that necessarily come under your marketing budget or another kind of thing? It's probably just coming under rent. Whereas a product company in B2C is much higher, it's about 15%. And that's because you need to generate the demand across a huge range of people. So assuming the people on this call are more B2B, what we're finding is that it's about 6% for services companies, 8% product companies. That's what the Deloitte survey. But the final thing on this particular area, before I kind of drill into a bit more how you should determine for your own particular business, within B2B products, software has a significantly higher spend. So partly that's because there's a much higher gross margin. Once you've invested a lot of money up front developing that product, and then whilst it's obviously a cost to support it or host it ongoing development work, it's really then all about getting it to market and getting it to market quickly in a lot of cases. And the survey from Deloitte says if you're a software company, you need to be spending, typically are spending 21% of your full cost revenue on getting that to market on the marketing side of things. So big variance, but that's sort of, from a B2B side, typically it's 6% and 8% of your services, 8% of the product, but 20% if you're a software company. So let's talk a little bit really now about how you define your own spend, and how when we talk to clients about how much they should spend on marketing, what they should look at. The most important thing is what a client's worth to you. The lifetime value of a customer is critical to understand and then know what, and that helps determine what your target cost to acquire a customer should be, your CAC, as people would call it. And yet I know there's no such thing as a typical customer, but work off averages and say, if you want to spend 10% of your, if you want to spend 10% of the revenue, on marketing, and your lifetime value of a customer is 20 grand, then you should be spending £2,000 to acquire that customer on average. Now that doesn't, by the way, include just the marketing part of it. It should also, the cost of customer acquisition should also include salespeople, commissions, everything that kind of meets up, you spend to get that new logo one. And of course, I know, as I say, some deals will have a higher cost, some will have lower, but they should always be below the lifetime value of the customer. And that really should be your starting point, because that really does define how you go and spend your marketing. If you're, I kind of use examples like looking at Tesco versus Boeing, right? If you're Tesco and you're going to have people come into the shop and spend a little bit of money each time, you're going to go mass advertising, mass marketing. If you're Boeing, you've got 200 people that potential customers. Each one's going to spend £1 billion, an airline. You need to spend a lot more trying to acquire them. You need to be, wining and dining them, taking them out, doing all these things that you need to be doing. But really starting with that kind of, focus on where you're going to, what you're going to make from a customer, split that out to say, right, okay, from that, let's say I want to spend £2,000 to acquire a customer, £500 on average is going to go to my sales team. I'm going to spend £300 on average on the marketing collateral and all this kind of stuff, brochures, websites, etc., throughout the year. And then you know what's left, and that's in this example, £1,200 to get those opportunities. And you can actually then take it even further. You can say that if you're closing 1 in 4 deals on average, you want to spend £1,200 to acquire a deal, acquire a customer. Well, each opportunity, 1 in 4, is worth £300 to you. So whilst you get high for some and low for others, that's really what you want to be sort of focusing in on. And whether you do outbound marketing or whether you do pay per click, you can really, really measure down to that layer. And I think the final thing I would say on this sort of CAC thing is, if you overspend, you're not going to be profitable. But if you consistently underspend to try and save money, it's going to impact, it will impact your growth and the number of new clients you sign up. Unfortunately, there's often no shortcut to those things. The next bit I would say defines your spend is where you are as a business, how new you are at, where you're, and that really sort of, what is your brand, how well known are you, and your growth plans. And I think, if the newer you are as a company, the more you need to spend. People need to know who you are and how you help them, and you need to get on their radar and build trust. You'll have fewer case studies, less social proof, less of a track record. And in those early days, you won't have a flood of inbound inquiries. Word of mouth won't really have started to spread as fast as you need. And so you have to spend more than an established company in our industry. You'll also have ambitious growth rates and faster growth rates. So you don't always know what your sales are exactly going to be at the end of the year, but you have to set your budget in line with what you want to hit, because otherwise they just won't get there. So it's a risk, but unfortunately that's business. Risk is part of the business. And I think the trick here is to find the marketing plans and marketing partners that reduce your risk as much as possible. So I know that all, seems like a lot, especially if you are a new software company. You already know that the average is 20%. And now I'm saying, well, if you're new, you need to spend a bit more, could be spending 20 to 30% of the business. It is a lot, but that is what people are spending typically in that kind of business to get themselves launched once they've built the product. Of course, if you're established, you can get away with far less. You've got a brand, you've got loyal customers that aren't going anywhere. They give you recurring revenue each year. You've got a bunch of your revenue already allocated, so you can spend a lot less of that on marketing. And I think the final thing I'm going to say on this slide is, you look at what your competition is doing. Yeah, if it's a highly competitive industries and lots of people are on a sort of massive land grab to try and grab your market and grab your customers, then that's going to impact what you spend as well. If you think you've got a product that is better than Coca-Cola, amazing, fantastic, but you've got to spend big to penetrate even a small piece of that market, given what your competition are doing. I'm sorry, this all comes down to sort of very basic business stuff, but sometimes we need to go back to basics to get the answers. So, I have to say, I don't know if others agree with me, but I find time and again, and especially I think in the UK market compared to others, people are really under budgeting when it comes to marketing spend. I think partly because their first few customers have come from a sort of word of mouth referrals, friends of friends and people, initial, their contacts, and they're not used to spending it. When it comes to scaling up, they don't really fully appreciate how much needs to be spent to get there. And partly because of risk, it can be scary. So especially, if you don't know it's going to turn in sales or even opportunity to sell things, this is a risky business. So I'm going to talk a bit now about, where I think you need to spend your money. Is there anything any questions people want to ask at this particular time? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Just before you jump into this next slide,
Okay.
maybe we can just throw a question out there and get a bit of interaction going. Based on what we've covered so far, if people want to maybe pop in the chat whether they think they're spending too little or too much, just literally pop one or the other in the chat. Be interesting just to get a perspective on that. Don't feel obliged to if you would rather not. I'll let you know if we get anything in, Elliot, and carry on.
Well, we've always seen pictures as quite a short, sharp lunch and learn, and sort of giving some opinions, giving some thoughts, right? And it's always good to sort of have, that I don't want to be sort of dragging on too long. But what I want to sort of finally sort of wrap up with is, given what we're saying, and I think a lot of this is about marketing is about managing, the risk to basically focus on what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think that can make, I really don't think it understates it. Say it can make a whole difference in a successful business and not. Yeah. There's many different types of marketing channels, as we looked at the start, but for me, there's sort of three sort of overriding things. Yeah. That people should look at. Yeah. It's not a marketing plan. We can talk about marketing plan offline if anyone wants to, but it's about, where overall things. So the first thing is this: go where your customers are. If they're the type of people that hang out on Instagram, then go there. If it's the sort of thing people search for online, then spend money on Google or get your SEO right. If it's not really searchable, and a lot of our clients find this, partly because they're new, disruptive technology and people aren't looking for that kind of solution online, direct outreach is a very good, way to address that. Get in touch with people and tell them, this is how I can help you. Do you want to discuss it? I think the next thing is, look at those from a risk point of view. Try and assess how likely will it be to succeed. You're not going to know 100%, of course, but if you can try and get in front of someone, the further down the sales funnel towards a conversation with a, you know, likely customer, the better. You can get a hold of people and they say, yes, I want to talk, and I've got, you know, I've got a budget, or, you know, and I need for your service. That's great. Rather than just maybe sort of, sometimes people will throw out sort of, you know, just get them to visit a website, fill out, you know, do a quiz online or something like that. You've still got to do a lot of work afterwards. So the further you can get towards having an actual opportunity conversation, the better, because at that point you've got a 1 in 4 chance of closing a deal on average, rather than maybe, you know, a 1 in a million chance against someone that's you've never met, never heard of you, doesn't actually know what you do. I think the obvious stuff, of course, is that the free stuff you do is the lowest risks. Still work on getting referrals from your contacts and people you know, but that is passive. You have to wait on them to come to you, and you want to be in control to scale things up and hit your numbers. So always try and ask yourself, how likely is this particular thing to get me as close to someone becoming a customer as possible? And finally, it should be measurable, it should be scalable. Measurable because you really need to know clearly what each pound is getting you in terms of results. Outbound PPC is great for this. You can track the number of demos or meetings you set up, and from there the sales against each bit of money you spend. Brand advertising, PR, SEO is a bit more tricky to measure, but you will see long-term results, of course. And then scalability is important. There's nothing, you know, if you do some marketing that pays off, you can't repeat it. You know, for example, there's a, you know, you get invited to a trade show and you get loads of sort of some good leads. That's great, but it does, if you can't repeat it, it's not going to help you grow. Yeah, you need to be able to sort of turn this dial, say, I've tried this, it seems to work, I now need to be in a position to do more of it. So everything you do should be tested, measured, and then ramped up. Okay, so there you go. That's our views on how much you'd be spending, you know, where to spend it, things like that. Happy to answer any questions either here or offline, as they say. I will pause a minute. We wanted to keep this before, you know, 20 minutes, so I think we've hit that. Is there anything people want to ask? In which case, thank you. You know, as a wrap up, what we do at Phase 2 is outbound marketing to get you in front of your ideal customers. Email me if you'd like to find out more. And I hope this was a helpful, brief session. Thank you very much for listening. Paul, back to you. Okay. Let us, everyone, thank you for joining the call. Let us stop the recording and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
How do I stop the recording?
3 dots.
Hello. These are tough. Remember we tried doing them before and the first one went well, probably like last one.